picked up the payphone, and he called me and he called the squad, and he asked for me by name. He knew I'd been on for 9 months. And the second I picked up the phone to take his call, the FBI simultaneously moved in from where they were hiding, maybe 10 feet away. And so before he even grabbed the receiver, I actually heard the takedown from about 1,000 miles away.
The Voice of Gotham with Pat Brosnan. Two killers, 9 months on the run, and one detective who refused to stop hunting. Thomas Cross and Philippe Concepcion turned the South Bronx into their hunting ground. What started as a robbery case became the most personal manhunt of his career. This is how they were finally caught, and the woman whose survival made it possible.
Late 1980s into the early 1990s, the South Bronx was a war zone. Crack was everywhere, dead bodies everywhere. And two of the most cold-blooded evil animals this city has ever seen decided to make it their personal hunting ground. Thomas Cross and Felipe Concepcion. These two savage, cold-blooded killers unleashed a brutal two-man crime wave in the South Bronx in the late 1980s, robbing and murdering drug dealers across the 46th precinct and beyond, while wearing bulletproof vests, and each of them carried two 9mm semi-automatics. They went after drug dealers, but didn't give a damn who else got caught in the crossfire. Their reign included the February 24th, 1989 Kingsbridge double murder, an attempted triple homicide of Barbara Childs and Rita Ford, and Cherie Watson, the kidnapping and ransom of a 2-month-old infant, plus the murder of a New Jersey businessman with additional drug dealer homicide. Monsters who were finally caged for life after America's Most Wanted helped track them down. They were captures number 98 and number 99. This is the story of a few South Bronx bloodhound detectives who took it personally and launched an unrelenting, scorched earth hunt for two evil monsters. Two monsters who thought they were invincible. They really did. They were really wrong. They started with one of the most horrific cowardly acts you'll ever hear. February 24th, 1989. A quiet at Arm up in the Riverdale in Northwest Bronx. 3 women inside. These dirtbags thought it was a drug spot with cash. Wasn't. Went to the wrong apartment. It was 3 innocent women, Chase Bank manager and her 2 friends. Not drug dealers, respectable, hard-working New Yorkers. These monsters hit the wrong apartment. They cuffed them all together and they ripped pillows off the couch, shoved them over the women's faces, and executed them point blank. The third woman, Cherie Watson, Carrie. She survived. She survived. The bullet miraculously did not penetrate her skull. She's able to drag her body after being shot twice. She was able to drag her body across the floor, still cuffed to her 2 dead girlfriends, and call 911. What had happened, amazingly, was that the bullet had struck at a shallow angle and had grazed along the bone in what doctors called a skull graze trajectory, and somehow ricocheted without ever entering her brain. Fooled by the doctors, the miracle of North Bronx Hospital. By the way, the worst mistake 2 blooded killers ever could make. They left behind a living witness. She survived with a wicked scar on her forehead. The doctors, they were amazed, up, down, and sideways. No one could believe it. She could, and she wore her hair in bangs because she was so conscious about that scar. Eventually, that scar, she wanted blood. She wanted Bruce blood. She got the right detectives to make it happen. Thomas Cross made one massive mistake. He committed an armed robbery and shot a bodega worker in the arm right in the 46th precinct on 188. I caught that case. In that robbery case, launched me like a cannonball after these savages. Once I had the robbery case, I could now hunt them across the world. I did. Never stopped for one split second. That scar on her forehead was a daily reminder of what these Yananas had done to her. And by the way, you were not alone. Two other amazing manhunters, probably the best veteran detectives I've ever met, John Tierney and Jimmy Finnegan from the Bronx Homicide Task Force, were equally obsessed with taking down these guys. They were hunting in parallel with us the entire time.
The team was in place, the hunt was on, and Cross was about to make his first mistake.
The whole team, robbery and homicide task force together, never ever let up. Now, we almost captured Cross in Queens. I'd have gotten really lucky and learned through a snitch that he had been hiding out after the murders in Riverdale in a storage room next to a superintendent's apartment on University Avenue. We went over there. We tore the place apart. We couldn't find anything. Nothing. Not a clue. And on the wall, outside the room, written in very faint pencil, 7 numbers. Telephone number. He was unlisted. We couldn't break it. I reached out to a great buddy of mine, Jimmy Gilday, who was working in the organized crime task force, and he was able to crack it. Life is from the Bronx. So immediately, myself and about 10 detectives from the 46th Squad, along with the boss, Sergeant Murphy, we piled into cars and we raced out there. We positioned detectives all around the block to take Cross down if he tried to run. He had it locked down. And Sergeant Murphy and I tiptoed like ghosts around the house to peek through a basement window. The first thing we spotted was a huge pit bull. We had already confirmed that Cross owned one of those, so we checked one box. The coup de grace was a black jacket tossed across the bed with a Tiger King Karate School logo from Fordham Road. That was the exact jacket Thomas Cross had worn during the Riverdale murders. That tried desperately and to play it down as much as possible with the homeowner. He was an Indian guy, he was nervous by nature, but he had some sixth sense, some intuition. He picked up that this was really serious and he got scared. And he realized that he had a really bad guy in his basement apartment and he didn't want a bloodbath at his home. So we figured he must have called Cross or called one of his girlfriends and tipped them off. Because Cross never ever came back to that house again. We thought he might be still up in the Bronx because one of his other girlfriends, Sherelle, was having his baby boy at Union Hospital. So myself and my partner, Kevin Tracy, decided to stake out the hospital in a unique way. We both dressed in green scrubs with stethoscopes and clipboards and waited around the maternity area for several days after young Tom's birth. We thought Tom might possibly show up to see young Tom. And Sherelle, by the way, had his name tattooed on her right eye too, a small red heart that said Tom. We knew he had impregnated at least 3 girls and had several sons named Tom. We never really were convinced that a bloodthirsty killer like Thomas Cross would show up at the hospital. But on that 1 in a million chance, we stayed out the maternity ward for days. No luck. Instead, Cross ran straight to his aunt's house in Detroit, Michigan, and was working construction there under an assumed name. His mother's sister had no idea, wanted for multiple murders and the kidnapping of a 2-year-old in the Bronx. We put the case on America's Most Wanted. I broadcast live from Washington, D.C. on my birthday, coincidentally, and Thomas Cross was sitting in his aunt's house watching, of all things, America's Most Wanted, when his own face came up on the television screen. Priceless. He was quick. He grabbed his coat and took off into the night. His aunt saw the very same broadcast. She was in the living room with him, realized the truth, picked up the phone, and called the 46th Squad. I spoke to her directly. I immediately got the FBI agent in charge on the phone, in that section of Detroit, Michigan. He was at his Friday night bowling event. I told him flat out, your bowling game is over. We've got a serial murder on the run. To his credit, that agent moved lightning fast. He cordoned off the area, stopped trains, cars, stopped buses on the road. It was snowing, snaked out the airports, but Cross was slick. He grabbed a cab, laid down the back seat, and rode it all the way to Toledo, Ohio. We weren't finished. Russ had yet another girlfriend. Would they say tattooing on her right thigh? Yes, you can't make this stuff up. She had made a huge mistake and sent him a Valentine's Day card 2 weeks earlier for $90 inside it and some very colorful language about how Detective Brosnan was harassing her nonstop at her job down in the garment center in Manhattan. That part was true. When the FBI recovered everything from the Michigan location, I got that card FedExed to me overnight to the 4-6 squad. Now I had it, finally. And I had warned her, you send him anything, you speak to him, you're guilty of harboring a fugitive, a felony. So I went down to the garment center with that huge Valentine's Day card scotch taped to my bulletproof vest. It was underneath my jacket. I had zipped up my jacket. So when I walked into the office where she worked as a secretary, she immediately got into her ranting and raving, screaming, making a big scene about how I was harassing her and blah, blah, blah. So as she's making this noise, I slowly unzipped my jacket. She showed a card that she had sent with money to Thomas Frost, her boyfriend. She knew I had her.
She thought she could protect him. She was about to help bring him down.
She knew I had her. She went absolutely bananas. We put her in cuffs and leg irons, dragged her back to the squad on the 4-6, and I called her fiance. Nice guy, professional basketball player, and I laid it all out for him. She was two-timing him and sending money to her ex-boyfriend, Thomas Cross. Showed him the card. He was forward. So together, we joined forces and convinced her to cooperate. And she called Tom from the squad room, left him a message. Very shortly after, he called back. And he called on the 4-6 robbery squad phone, the landline. By then, I had already tipped off the FBI what was moving forward, and basically, based on her conversation, we learned that he was staying at a small mom-and-pop hotel in Toledo, Ohio. A little spot, quiet. The FBI immediately got the whole place staked out. They emptied every single room, including the owners, quietly set up around the property. Perfect stakeout. It was a Dunkin' Donuts right across the street. Tom, as it turned out, walked to that payphone right outside the Dunkin' Donuts. About 5 feet from there, we learned later, he threw down and hid in the bushes the gun, the 9mm that had killed the 2 women in Riverdale in the Bronx. Picked up the payphone, and he called me and he called the squad, and he asked for me by name. He knew I'd been on for 9 months. And the second I picked up the phone to take his call, the FBI simultaneously moved in from where they were hiding, maybe 10 feet away. And so before he even grabbed the receiver, I actually heard the takedown from about 1,000 miles away because the phone was never hung up. So it was an open line. It was absolutely amazing. And they recovered the 9mm where he had thrown it in the grass. And that gun came right back to the murder ballistically of Barbara and Rita. And the very next morning, myself, Detective Rick Fogarty, we flew to Toledo, Ohio to extradite Thomas Cross back to the Bronx. The moment we walked into the correctional facility where they were holding him, we immediately recognized one another. It's amazing. About a year or so earlier, while I was working narcotics, Cross had tried to drive a green Cadillac convertible full through one of our operations on Anderson Avenue in the 4-6. I immediately pulled him out of the car, searched him for guns, and noticed and remembered his open shirt was buttoned down, and I seen that he had a chest covered with old gunshot wounds, several of them, and they were outlined in crude jailhouse ink, 38 caliber 9mm. It's unreal. So I never forgot that, and I never forgot him. I just didn't put it together at that time. He never forgot me. So standing there in Toledo, in the correctional facility, we both knew this manhunt had come full circle. A year earlier, he was just another perp I had stopped on Amherst Avenue. Now he was a double murderer, in handcuffs, headed back to the Bronx to answer for the executions of Barbara Childs and Rita Falk and the attempted murder of Cherie Wilson. And getting him back to New York, that turned out to be yet another adventure. Detective Fogarty and I boarded a commercial flight with Frost secured in handcuffs, leg irons, and a waist chain. Before we could even push back from the gate, unbelievable, bad luck, the flight attendant, of all things, recognizes Cross from the prior week's America's Most Wanted program. It's the captain. A few minutes later, the captain comes out and tells us we have to get off his airplane. He did not want a notorious mass murderer like Cross on his airplane. He made it clear it was his plane. I explained to him that Cross was completely secured and under the control of two working New York City detectives. Captain Conley reached for a rulebook that looked about the size of the Manhattan phone directory and pointed to the regulation. His message was simple. He was the boss, he was the final authority on his aircraft, and if he wanted someone off, it would get off. In the story. So, off we went. Took another 3 hours before we could get another flight to board. So, had some time on my hands. You gotta understand, I genuinely hated Thomas Cross for what he'd done. The vicious murders and the kidnapping of a 2-year-old. So this was personal. I wanted to break his chops. And I wanted to make his trip back to New York as uncomfortable as humanly possible. So for the next 3 hours, I paraded him through the airport in handcuffs, leg irons, and a waist chain. Kill us some time. All the while, he's carrying nearly 90 pounds of his worldly possessions in a black hefty bag. And I jammed, this is the best, an America's Most Wanted baseball cap down over his head. No matter how hard he tried, and he was furious, he could not shake it off. So for the first time in a very long time, Thomas Cross wasn't hurting anybody. He was the one that everybody was looking at. We had one more problem. We still had to get Cross back to New York without getting thrown off yet another plane. So I came up with a little deception. I told Cross, in no uncertain terms, I was going to take off his leg irons and the waist chain before we boarded. In reality, I removed the leg irons, immediately cuffed his hands in front, draped my jacket over the cuffs so no one could see that he was a prisoner, and then I quietly pressed the muzzle of my .38 caliber Spectre Special into the middle of his back. I knew how fast he could be with those leg irons off. I made it crystal clear to him that if he tried to run, I was going to shoot him, and he would be graveyard dead. I also identified myself to the flight crew as a working NYPD detective, and they seated us in the very last row of the airplane, which is what I requested. Rick took the window seat, I took the aisle. Cross sat between us. My jacket remained draped across his lap, completely concealing the handcuffs. A short time later, we landed back in New York, and we delivered Thomas Cross back to the Bronx to answer for the executions of Barbara Childs and Rita Falk. After 9 relentless months, the hunt had finally ended. They both were sentenced to 58.5 years in prison, and subsequently put a $55,000 contract on my head with the Latin Kings. Son of the Bronx, I really wasn't that worried. The Latin Kings were punks. The Latin Kings were cowards. And I was a member of a much bigger gang, the NYPD, and had 40,000 armed brothers and sisters. And here's the update. As of now, Thomas Cross is still up in Attica, 36 years. He's 62 years old, and he will be 82 years old before he's even considered for the first time for parole. That's great news.